For real.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is a very nice impromptu show today. Right now, I got Sanduni and Michelle from OG Rose. Um, what the talk has to do, it's probably going to be centered around my article that I wrote today. I wrote this piece about nothingness and presentness. Now, the influence for this talk is actually I got very inspired from Cadell's talk with Thomas Wynn, and I've also read some of Thomas Wynn's articles um, last night on this concept of releasement and how to deal with the problem of nihilism, so to speak. And I think what's fascinating about Thomas Wynn's work is that you he proposes that actually nihilism sort of in some ways unlearns itself, um, basically by being what it is. um, and so in some sense, like his famous phrase of like, um, nothing there is nothing to be achieved because the achievement is nothing. So it's a very, like, I think it's a very brilliant phrase, but it's a very deep phrase on this idea. But anyways, it made me think about nothing in terms of presentness. And I remember Daniel, Michelle's husband, he would, I remember one time he commented and said that, the present doesn't exist, right? And when we think about the present, it's true that it doesn't exist. Hegel and the phenomenology of spirit does a very good example of showing how the now is always superseded by another now and another now and another now. So whatever now that you're pointing to doesn't exist because it's already superseded by another now. So in that sense, it's always swallowed up by the universal for Hegel. So he does this funny thing where he's like, "What are you talking about exactly when you're talking about the now?" Because it's another now, another now. Um, so I took these kind of like conglomeration of concepts, and I basically said that nothingness and presentness they have this like swallowing type of like ability, like they have like this annihilating ability with everything. um, and I thought that was such a brilliant way to sort of understand how you can embody becoming. The only way that you can embody becoming, in my opinion, is understanding how presence works. And when you understand presence, you kind of have an idea of what nothingness is. Only because that nothingness is always superseded by another nothingness, by whatever your idea of nothingness is, by whatever your idea of presentness is. Um, of course, this is like going into like a very postmodern structure, but yeah, that's basically like the inspiration of my essay, and the emphasis on being present and what that does to us. But I've talked too much. I'll let you guys tell me your thoughts on my essay because I think that's probably a better summary.
That's good. That was great, Javier. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah. Go on, Michelle.
So, yeah, I enjoyed that talk a lot as well with Cadell and Thomas Wynn. And I really like your honing in on that, this idea of like nothingness and nihilism and how it relates to the present. And, also Daniel's comment. And it makes me wonder then, sort of like it's strange are here embodied. So it's strange because we're talking about this like not present present, right? It's never really actually, it's always slipping away, or it's always slipping through us. I don't know, I kind of have thought about the language of it escaping us, but in a sense, it's not so much that as it just kind of passes through us. We seem to be the mediator between the past and the future. And it seems like that now is always, that, is always slipping beyond the other now and the other now and the other sequential nows, is through us. It's almost like we're the mediator. But I guess I just wanted to sort of ask the question of how is it then that us being embodied are able to understand nihilism as this type of sort of like ever slipping away nows, when really like our phenomenological experience of reality is a kind of almost ever it's sort of like, it's almost the landscape is always around us or something like that. Like we're not in now, but we're in this sort of movement. So I guess what I mean to say is like, how does that help us relate to accepting and embracing nihilism and allowing that to make us more present? Because there's a lot of times people will say, almost just as like, encouragement, like be present and be here now, and yet that's impossible in a sense, right? Because just as soon as we're present, we're not if we think about it like technically. So are we just to kind of exist as like the mediator? And it makes me think a little bit about like that line I mentioned about like from Buber about like how the real encounters are always unmediated and immediate. There's something about like, it's strange though, because then we end up being the mediators between the future and the past. The past and the future. So I guess what I mean to say is like, how does that kind of help us in a sense, maybe just the acceptance of that constant inability to be present actually can make us more present. That's sort of the question that comes to mind, because it's meant to be encouraging and it's a very good thing to encourage, right? Being present, but yet then why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? And I wonder if it's just because we're always in this tension of being the mediator between the past and the future.
I think it's quite hard to sort of be present in the present because we have nothing to dwell upon. Whereas to be back and forth with the past and the future, we have perhaps a certain emotion, a certain event, a situation to sort of dwell upon, to examine, to sort of constantly think and rethink. Whereas the present moment almost seems impossible to a certain extent, is because it's happening. It's constantly happening. And after reading your article this morning, what I thought was, the first thing that came to my mind was that, we exist in moments. And moments are fleeting, and same as present. It's here, and now it's the past, and the future at the same time. Be present. What does that mean? And does it really mean that you let things be, as in you don't sort of contemplate what's gone, what's coming? You're in a state of mind where you're embodying whatever's happening right now. That could be this conversation. All I'm thinking right now is this conversation. And that means I am present in this moment. But then again, I'm dwelling upon an article you wrote 5 hours ago. So where am I? Yeah, that's sort of what I think. And another thing that we could sort of, deliberate with nothingness and being present. Well, if we exist in moments, and if nothing is sort of everything, then how do you sort of achieve nothing? You have to have everything to finally achieve nothing. It's almost like you have to become and then unbecome all that you've become. And for that, you have to unravel and trace your steps back. And I think that's where you sort of find Buddhism to be very interesting, because that's Buddha's definition of enlightenment, where you unravel all the illusions that you've created in the world in your mind. And you refer to this in your article, Javier. And I think that was a very good point about your illusions and the determination that sort of has and that impacts in your life. And so, yes, we talk about nothingness, right? Nothingness is a state of mind again, but we have all of these illusions and these layers of illusions. So are we really ever truly present? Because we're constantly living in illusion. We're always in our head about something. So when you're in your head, Where exactly are you present? I mean, it's not so literal as much as where you are physically, but even mentally, because it is a state of mind, isn't it? You know, nothingness and the present moment. What is present? Am I mentally present or physically present in a location? Is that what you're referring to? Or where my thoughts are right now? Am I truly engaging with my surroundings? Which would be this conversation, which would be you and Javier. But then again, is it that simple? Because while you exist in the present, you always connect this moment with a passing moment or a moment to come. Like, what is the outcome of this discussion? Where are we sort of trying to take the article that we wrote 5 hours ago? So where does that leave us in terms of being truly present? Is that a sense of self-awareness where you sort of exist knowing all of this will come and all of this will go and it's fleeting, and that is definite? Because yes, everything is fleeting. And is accepting that the constant present, or will the present change? Those are some of the questions that I was thinking about. What do you think, Javier?
Yeah, I think you guys pose really good questions. A lot of what I'm hearing is a lot of conflict between how do I sort myself in reality, how do I ground myself in reality with knowing that, in a very Buddhist way, like the world is illusion, so to speak. How do I ground myself in that understanding? I think one of the best things that I could use is the Buddhist notion of non-attachment. And non-attachment would essentially, you'd understand that you're not controlling the desire. You're just sort of acknowledging the desire. And I think that's like the very specific difference. And because we're acknowledging that desire, it allows itself to be. And I think, like, if we really think about it, we're actually very much always in the past because of the fact that we have a memory. Like, when I see something, I see a cat, and I go, I know it's a cat because I remember seeing a cat for the first time. I remember being taught the name of cat. I remember a specific cat and everything like that. So I know there's background noise, but
I was just hoping if it's, fade away. Sometimes it does that, right?
When we talk, do you hear that as well, Javier?
no.
Okay.
I mean, well, I guess it's when I'm talking.
Yeah, it's just when you're talking. Well, can I say one thing? Like, I don't.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's really good, and that's really, really true. And there's something so insanely simple and yet profound, right? About like the acknowledging, just even acknowledging. I think a lot of times we maybe don't want to acknowledge because maybe we don't want to face ourselves. We don't want to face actually the fact that the present moment is always kind of eclipsing the next one. But there is something very, very powerful about the acknowledging of a certain thing, or if we're talking about it in terms of desire, that acknowledgement is important because it almost doesn't allow it to do what it needs to do through you if you don't acknowledge it. So that was the one thing I would just say. And that acknowledgement, it's kind of like, yes, it's doing something, but there is something about it that's also doing nothing really. Like, you're not really necessarily doing anything in particular with that desire. You're just acknowledging it. It's almost like just if somebody were to step in the room to just acknowledge that person's existence, it's like you acknowledge the existence of that desire, and somehow that allows it to be able to. There's something about that seems to kind of let it, again, like the time itself, or the present, move through you in whatever way it needs to. Because I think a lot of times with time we do sort of get fixed on it or very certain about it, and we, you know, like Sandy was saying about the past, we and like we said too, we often do live in the past, and because we can, it is something that we can kind of feel as more substantial, right, or more like solid than the present moment, which is always, again, passing through us. But it's funny because in your paper you talked about how it's actually this each very present moment being the event itself versus just relying on events that have happened, and I think that's really an important shift because it allows the event itself to be the focus and the where we want dwells, like, because I think the word dwells gets the connotation of like dwelling and like holding on to the desire, holding on to and almost in a way that it's like if you're holding something so tight you really can't see like what it is. You know, to acknowledge is actually to like open up and allow yourself to see it and acknowledge it, but then you also let it do what it needs to do, whether it remains to stay there or, you know, it decides to go off or it decides to return. I think that is important in this idea of like, there does seem to be this idea of the letting it go, but it feels so like it's hard to like ground yourself, right? Like in that because it's so open, and whereas using the event of the past feels like it's something I can step on, like it's something very solid I can kind of use as a platform. And in some ways the time layers to bring us where we are today. So there is sort of some sort of sense of connection in a sense through us, but at the same time, it is not, you know, the events that we kind of rely on to sort of motivate us in the present, or sort of sustain us is very strange because it's less real, and yet we decide to make it very concrete to give us some sort of stability. But really, like if we can shift our mind to the event itself being this, you know, like the language we're using, like this swallowing up of the present, then I think that can allow us to sort of, I don't know, I just think that being the event it's almost like the event horizon. It's always like with the sun either rising or setting. That being the event helps us to shift onto, you know, where are we today? Where are we? How are we relating to the world around us in this present, which again is always moving on to the next and the next and the next. It's funny because so two things really quick, and then I'll stop. But there's two. In one ways, we can think of this in a very nihilistic way, right? Like there's no present. You know, there's just no present because it's not. You know, it's always kind of behind you, before you. Or we could think of it as like constant presence all the time. It's like this succession of constant presence. You know, people say, oh, the present is the real gift, and that type of language. Well, it's kind of like in that sense, then if we could shift to seeing the event as the present, right, then there could be this, it's like this torrent of constant successive presence, basically. So anyways, those are a couple things that came to mind.
You two make such wonderful points, and Javier talked about attachment, and you sort of talked about letting go. And, you know, this primitive sign of wanting, this desire, and in Buddhism, you know, attachment is, you know, known to be the main cause of suffering. And it's funny how you said sometimes it's about letting go, but then again, to let something go, you believe you possess it, right? You feel like you've received your desire or you've accomplished it. But perhaps the fine line is, or the truth is, letting it be for what it is, and then you acknowledge its presence. It could exist, but it could not be a part of your life, or it could be something you don't have or haven't accomplished. So when you sort of say letting it go, you make it almost sound like you've had it. You know, it's in possession, it's mine. I'm at liberty to dispose it. But perhaps desire and attachment and letting it be, they're very interconnected, because, you know, this motivated state of wanting something, there is action-based, you know, desire, there is good-based desire, there is pleasure-based desire. There's so many different theories of desire, and with those different theories, you set the outcome of your expectation. Do you expect, you know, if it's action-based, do you expect a response? Do you expect an acknowledgement? Do you wish to be validated. And if it's good based, you expect your noble act to be commended or seen to be as a noble act. So there is always some sort of expectation in your desire, and that comes with attachment. You're attached to your desire, and you're attached to the outcome of that desire. But then, if it motivates you, and if you truly desire something, would you be okay with just letting that desire be, in the sense where you pursue it, you love it, you do something for it, you nurture it, and then you let it exist? Or do you have to possess it? You know, with desire comes this, when I think of desire, I think it's very, very personal, it makes you seem like it has to be a possession, you know, a desire. You desire to be wanted, you desire to be accepted, you desire to be heard. There is an expectation there. But what about just being heard, or, you know, just speaking because you know that you would be heard? But that's up to you, because what I'm saying right now will be perceived in a different manner by Michelle than it will by you, Javier. You're both thinking about two very different things this very moment. But I am being heard. I'm present and I'm being heard. And therefore, my desire to be heard is accomplished. And it does not have to be validated or accepted, because it's reaching out to you right now. So this whole sense of attachment, and attachment to the now and past and the present, what are we attached to? What sort of attachment are we talking about? Attachment to the outcome of our desire, or attachment to that situation? You know, that what inspired that desire? Why am I desiring what I'm desiring? What do you fixate on? Because as humans, we constantly tend to fixate. And that's why, you know, we have this argument that there is no now. Because in our head, we're always in our head is always somewhere else. So it's a fine line. I mean, I always say this, and I've been saying this quite often since yesterday, that, you know, life is a fine act of, life is an act between letting it go and letting it be, because, you know, there's only so much in your control. And we never fixate on things in our control. I mean, there are things in our control, right? There are things in our control, but we never fixate on that. We fixate on what sort of needs to be, you know, a collective effort. So perhaps that's where the suffering is, the suffering of attachment, because the outcome of your desire is a response of the other person, or the other, you know, the counter effect of how someone responds to it or reacts to it. Why can't you have the satisfaction of having a desire purely by pursuing it, by acknowledging it, by knowing that it's there and I feel it? I will actively try and pursue it, achieve it, whether it's, you know, perhaps studying something or traveling or meeting a person or telling a person how you feel. Why can't you sort of just know that it's okay to act upon that desire and let the outcome go, or let the outcome be? You don't have to let the outcome go, because then it seems like you let it go because it's not the outcome you wanted. But why can't you just let the outcome be and just be present and accept that perhaps it's not exactly the outcome I wanted, but we have an outcome, right? And that's the present moment. That outcome may not be what we wanted, but there will always be an outcome. It might not be what we want, but it exists, and it's there, and it's right in front of you. And perhaps acknowledging it is what it's all about being in the present moment. I mean, that's just a few things on my mind. What do you think, Javier? Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to think there. Yeah, Michelle, make that face. It's okay. Well, let's see if I can push through it.
I mean, yes, we want to hear what you are saying, Javier. So we're sorry that it's crashed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to hear what I'm saying. Okay. The present moment. It's just like, yeah. Okay.
I'm so not tech savvy. I don't even know where to begin to stop something like this. I don't know. Really.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, Sandy's like, don't say anything. We'll manifest it correctly if you talk about it correctly.
We'll just sort of communicate telepathically, just improvise and fill in gaps. Yes.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you might say what you want to say, but we'll hear what we want to hear. Quite literally at this point. So, yeah. Love that. Golly.
But yeah, your point on outcome. I don't know. I mean, I think pursuing a desire. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Because, like, you know, is it the letting be of the desire, or is it sort of trying to control the desire in a direction? That's like the point that I'm thinking about. But of course, it helps that, you know, when we talk about outcomes, that sure we try to let it be the outcome. Oh, look at that. Pure silence. But I'll yeah, it's still very static. But go ahead, guys.
Okay, I'm gonna ask. Can you go off and on again, Javier, and see if it would make a difference, or no?
What do you mean, like?
Like if you were to click leave and then enter back in, I know that might mess it up, and it's rather scratchy. Unfortunately, we'd love to hear what you're saying, but it's very hard.
Hearing at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I could do that.
What if you sort of take off the mic and speak to the speaker? I don't know.
He's gone. Yeah. I was gonna look up like how to stop scratching this on stream.
Yeah, I don't know if that is past. Have you asked her to say that?
Yeah, it's let me see. Maybe it's let me see. Then silence.
I was gonna start beatboxing.
Just please beatbox.
Yeah.
Take off your mic and speak to the computer or whatever you're.
Take off my mic.
Like your headphone. Does he? No.
He doesn't have headphones.
Do you want to put on headphones then? You can tell I'm blind. No, I literally. Ghastly. Yeah.
Okay, I can try putting on headphones.
It's a Sanduni show.
It's us.
It's so loud.
We're hilarious.
Sorry for technical difficulties.
Yes.
Hopefully it'll come right. We're too attached to the outcome of this. See, we want it to be clearly.
We clearly want to be present and candid about our discussion.
We want to be able to be heard and
give you a sense of clarity, and perhaps gain a sense of clarity.
Excellent. Yes. But that honestly, like, that's kind of the why this is tricky though, because it's a balance of being able to like not be attached to a certain outcome, but you do have to have, for like things to function, there are certain things you have to kind of rely on or something.
Yeah, and it has an expectation, right?
Yeah.
Or else what's the point? Why would you pursue anything if you didn't have an expectation? And it's quite interesting.
It is. It is. And also, like, we're sort of attached to our. The best attachment, I think, is like to yourself, right? Because it's kind of always guaranteed.
It's better. Mm-hmm. It's not better, is it?
Well, the laugh is always much better.
We're too attached to the outcome of the sound.
Yes.
And what it should be like.
You sound like Dolly.
Yeah, I don't have like a mic, really. So, but
Yes. You can leave and come back. Do you want to try that?
Yeah, let's try that.
Sure.
That looks fine.
Yeah.
Javier, we're gonna leave and come back and see if that makes a difference.
okay.
Maybe we're a problem.
Maybe we're the problem. We'll be back.
Let's see what I can do here. I tried to fix the sound before the show started, and it wasn't that bad, like at all. And then all of a sudden, it got really bad. And so I don't know what's happening. It got really bad all of a sudden. So I don't know if it has to do with like connections. Like, I'm not sure about all that. So that's the only thing. Like, I'm not sure. But let's see. They come back. They came back. So
We're back. Any better?
let me see. Am I?
It's better.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
it's
that's
better.
the problem.
Yeah, we were
We
the problem.
apologize to the masses.
We're so sorry.
Yes, we have. It was me, it was me. Dolly Parton on helium, I told you.
You're not Dolly Parton on helium, my love. No, you're fine. It's okay. Okay, so it's better now. We can actually hear you. So we're excited to hear your wonderful points on pursuing desire.
Okay. So my point was this notion of, you know, if we're pursuing a sort of outcome, I'm just not sure if we're exactly
Yes.
letting it arise as we need it to arise. That's the only thing. And I think yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Actually.
So the idea of like pursuing desire is potentially not practicing like a detachment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it might be, because like if you think about it, if you follow desire, like automatically you are sort of like following some type of like outcome. I think this is like the impossibility of it. And even though you acknowledge that it is possible in your mind that the outcome might not be what you want, and so if you're like sort of ready to accept that, there is still like this attachment to the hope of that possible outcome, even though you're fully aware of that outcome not manifesting itself. So you're like in this weird tension between like you're trying to let it be, but then also like you're not letting it be, or you're just acknowledging that it would fail or it could fail. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that acknowledging the failure or the possible failure doesn't help you. I think it does help. However, I think sometimes we underestimate how like hurtful that failure can be. I think that's like the point that I'm trying to get at. Oh, you guys froze. That's interesting. But yeah. This has been an interesting life. I wouldn't. If anybody can bear through this, then you guys are really practicing what I wrote my article on. Let's see if they're able to join back. Oh, thanks, Will. Thanks, man. Always a pleasure talking to you, man. Yeah, I haven't seen you in a while, Will. Yeah. We should do a stream sometime. I think was it I started reading some of. Do I have your email? Let me see. Do I have your email? I think my email might have remembered your email, but I'm not sure. You can resend it, Will.
Yes, it was the Wi-Fi.
It's the what?
Oh, just the Wi-Fi. Just the Wi-Fi. Sorry, it said it was like the Wi-Fi bars were up, but it wasn't. So we connected to cell data, and now we're here.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys got what I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying, even entertaining the possibility of the failure is that we can underestimate the failure of the desire. And so that can actually cause us a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that pursuit of that desire, like, for example, I could tell myself, I'm going to pursue this girl. You can tell you that yourself. And then in the middle of your pursuing, you go, okay, I'm not going to get attached to the outcome, even if it doesn't manifest itself in my pursuit, like in my idea of the pursuit or whatever it is, right? But problem is, in the middle of the pursuit, or in the realization of the failure, right? Like, let's say, for example, like the girl doesn't want you, right? Like finally the outcome arises, like the girl doesn't want you. And the whole time you've been telling yourself, okay, whatever happens, I'm not going to get upset. Like the outcome is just going to be what it is. Now, I think it's possible that you might handle it well, but I think it's also possible that the failure of the outcome might become so overwhelming, because the problem is you might not actually expect it to be that painful. And I think that's like the one thing that actually, and in that case, then you get caught in the trap.
I wonder then, like, I get what you're saying. I think that's a really good point, and I'm sure that most human beings can relate to that, and sort of the unexpected devastation of pain in that expectation, attachment, desire. I wonder then how, it's the way that you phrased it in this scenario is that the person is saying, like, I'll be okay with whatever outcome, right? But is that they're not really okay with any outcome? No, like there's it's, I don't know if it just has to be being like honest with oneself or something, like that could basically bypass this issue. But like, how does one then get out of that? It's just to truly not have an outcome that is desired. I mean, it's tricky with relationships, right? Because there is some sense of like people having to do something in moving toward one another. So that's why I'm really happy you brought that up, because it's easy to talk about it in the abstract, right? But then, like, what does that actually mean in terms of human relationships? And the only thing that I could think of, and I don't know if it's sufficient as an answer, but it's a consideration, is that the only thing that and I remember saying this to one time, Javier, off record, when we were talking about, actually it was from the nihilism conversation with after Thomas Wynne and Cadell spoke, but the only thing that a person has access to or can actually reach is themselves, right? That's the only thing. That's the only person you can ever actually reach. And because even in relationship, you can have a sense of connection there, but you don't ever know fully, like, what is the other person's experience of that relationship, or, you know, what they're always thinking, all of that. And so the best thing could be then to sort of make the outcome yourself. And I don't think that's easy. I don't know even if that's necessarily possible. But if the outcome becomes what is in your facilities and in your reach, right, then that would become what is sort of the expectation and the attachment. I'm just trying to push on this because there are some attachments in life. We're attached to our own minds and our own bodies. You know, we have attachments and we develop attachments. I think nihilism and the idea of the ever passing present is to get very comfortable with the very uncomfortable place of letting go and which is actually letting be. To Sanduni's point, we think of it as letting go, but we never held it. We never had it. We never possessed it. So it's like this deep recognition that it was always just letting it be as it was, as it is, existing in your sphere somehow, but never in your possession. So I don't know. I think if perhaps the idea, maybe this is idealistic, but the idea of two people working on what they can reach, which is themselves as the outcome, could perhaps recognize that in each other, and that could create a very beautiful bond or even a relationship. I don't know, guys. These are just thoughts that are coming to mind. And I think it's a very good question, and it's very important because, like I said, I think every human can resonate with that deep level of pain that's unexpected, you know, because the expectation was always on an outcome, even if you say it wasn't, you know. So yeah.
See, I don't think it's that simple because, Javier, you said the outcome could be that the person you're pursuing sort of rejects you or you don't end up together. But what about the outcome being an illusion? So when you sort of meet someone, you don't really fully get to know the person right away. There's a sense of physical attraction to begin with, or, you know, there's some sort of outer aesthetic attraction, and then you sort of get to know each other. So let's say you speak for you speak for a week or so. You don't still get to fully know a person, and you pursue them, right? You pursue them and you think, okay, I think I fancy this person. But you also, with your desire to pursue this person, you create an illusion in your mind of who this person is, reality versus potential. And I believe that is where the suffering of attachment lies. That is exactly where it lies, because the sense of, but I thought he or she would be like this. But that's your problem, because that's what you thought, and you discover it quite later. So even if you're in it to say, well, I'm going to try, oh well, or what if? Yes, but your oh well comes with a sense of expectation of what this person could possibly be. What qualities would they entail? Or how it would go down the road, like how would you sort of end up together? Sometimes you could actually end up with this person and think, well, this was not what I expected, and it's perhaps not my cup of tea, right? You have those instances, and I feel like with this desire and the attachment desire, I mean, they go hand in hand. You know, one does not exist without the other, because if you desire, that means you're attached to that desire, and even if you're not so bothered with the outcome, you will be, because you have a sense of expectation, right? You have some sort of standard set of what the outcome would be, and if the outcome is not what you expected it to be, there is suffering there. Because, I mean, a lot of Buddhism dwells upon, you know, unbecoming, which means detaching yourself from all worldly attachments, you know, whether it's your relationships, your family, your possessions. I mean, that's how it is, because there's this interesting notion that I sort of I saw a famous monk talk about. I can't think of his name, and he said the situation he presented was a funeral, and both the parents were dead and lying in their respective coffins, and there was their baby, who was just a few months old, sat at the bottom of these coffins, just laughing and being jolly and merry, because he does not know the parents. There's no attachment, even though it took those two people to sort of create that life. That suffering, that agony comes from your attachment. I mean, there is a physical attachment. They probably would have the same blood type, or physical characteristics that look the same. But he doesn't have the attachment in his mind, so he's not crying. He doesn't know it because he's not acknowledging it. And that attachment is in your head. So the point I'm sort of trying to make here is attachment and desire. You could have a desire with complete awareness, but then having a desire will inevitably lead to pain, because somewhere lies an expectation. Even if you expect nothing, to get to that nothing, you sort of have a certain level of illusion where you're like, well, if X, Y, Z happens, then it's not the outcome I want. So you have an expectation there. And that sort of leads to suffering. So when you talk about desire and attachment, they're not really two things to me. Yes, we desire things, and I mean, you could get it and you could still lose it, right? That's life. You lose, you come with nothing, you go with nothing. So inevitably, you'll be suffering, and pain is inevitable. And that's sort of the philosophy of, would you rather choose to mindfully suffer or mindfully let things be, where I come with nothing, I go with nothing, you're here, I enjoy your company, but you're not mine. I don't physically possess you, and you're at liberty to walk away if you wish. But it's easier said than done, right? Yes, you are at liberty to do so, but I don't want you to. So there's attachment there. I desire for you to stay longer. I desire that you will sort of never go away. There is a sense of pain and suffering, and with every sort of attachment, and that's sort of how I see it, and that's my argument. And growing up in a predominantly Buddhist culture, that is sort of how I saw the whole preaching, and how life is suffering. Life is inevitably different phases of suffering. When you're happy, the next instinct you have is, what if I lose it? What if it goes away, right? That's how we're driven by fear most of the times. And I remember talking about this with Michelle, that even in good times, for a moment you ask yourself, is it too good to be true? Should I be this happy? Will it last? So there is a constant sense of fear, even with your desire and your attachment to that desire. Even though you have it and you're mindful about it and you're aware that the outcome could be either, you're still affected by it. And as long as you're affected by it, there's suffering. Yeah, that's pretty much what's on my mind right now.
One of my favorite things, I think it was like from a Buddhist book I read, was acknowledging that even when you can't, you have to sort of let go of when you're trying to let go. So that acknowledgement of, I'm trying to let go, but I can't let go. So then you even let go of that. Yeah. And I found that very beneficial. The other thing is, and I think this is where Buddhism can kind of get like twisted for the Western mind, is that illusions have effects. And what's like paradoxical about the suffering and being present is that actually suffering is always ending in every moment, because there's always a present, there's always a now. I think what is painful, and I think this is kind of what Sanduni pointed out, is that it's the moment we sort of place our finger on the event, we say, oh, that's the outcome. The moment you say that's the outcome, you've been living in the past, essentially. Because once you realize that's the outcome, you thrust yourself into suffering. Now, are we going to be constantly struggling to not do this? Absolutely. But I think it's just like it's really reminds me of like Deleuze's notion of how do you determine a breakthrough from a breakdown? And I think that is our problem with the notion of like outcome, is that if the outcome fails, we call it a breakdown and then we thrust ourselves into suffering. But Deleuze proposes the radical, like skeptical idea that how do you determine that that's a breakdown? So here you can see like our own subjectivity interfering with our, you could say, our reality. But yeah.
I thought that was really good, Sanduni and Javier. And it kind of makes me think then, well, maybe I'll volley a quick question to you, Javier, and then I'll comment a little bit more on what you both just said. But that kind of like unexpected level of pain that was just more than one could have anticipated, is that avoidable? Like, if one isn't a good practice of these things, is it avoidable, or is it just like, is it just going to hurt really, really badly? And it's kind of like Rilke, where he says like, nothing's final, like let all of these things kind of pass through you, let it all happen, because nothing is final, really. It's so I don't know, I just wanted to posit that question really quick in a volley.
Well, I mean, it hurts because you don't accept it, essentially.
Yeah,
and then you have to accept that you can't accept it. That's the negation of the negation.
That's good, and I agree with you. I wonder then, it makes me think then that you just have to like, it's in that moment when one wants to just sort of kick and scream and fight it so badly because they want to do something to get back the thing that they desire so desperately. But it's like in that moment when one has to just almost play dead. Like it's this weird, it's this kind of that's not maybe the best terminology, but that's sometimes how prey will just not be caught by whatever's trying to catch them. And it's funny because in this, it's almost like we want to be caught, we want to catch, and so there's a kind of a desire to just sort of kick and scream and fight and protest and not accept it because it's unacceptable, because it feels impossible, it feels impossibly unbearable. So there's that desire, but it's almost like in that moment one has to kind of literally just like let all of that feeling, all of those feelings that come up and emerge, like basically just lay down and let it come over you completely, like just let it work through oneself entirely. And maybe the good, though there's something excruciating about that, that's kind of like letting yourself die in a way. Let the painful death happen, let it happen, and because that death is also a kind of birth. Let the labor pains happen, let it take over you so that you can birth the new moment, right? Like you said, Javier, like you can end the suffering in this because you are given a new opportunity to like live, in the present moment, in the becoming, right? In this, I want to say kind of an evolving process of becoming. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the acceptance is a huge part of why it hurts so much. And then also, I think kind of going back to this idea of, it's almost like, can we accept ourselves? Like, because again, to go back, we only have we can only ever kind of reach ourselves, right? So there's something very strange because it sounds very, I don't know, it's strange. It can sort of sound selfish in a sense, but it's almost like if we can put the desire on the present moment, though that's never necessarily how reality plays out. I don't know. I guess maybe the thought is like these kind of the explosive, like I was saying, death and rebirth type of moments. Perhaps they could be reminders of what always was, right? What we always didn't have, that person. We always didn't have that thing we wanted. And even if we had it, you know, like Sanduni is pointing out, we have the idea, right? We have the idea, and then we have reality. We have the ideal. You know, our ideas are often the ideals. We always paint it like the perfect situation, like the most incredible, the most amazing, you know. And I think that's like our creative capacity, and that's so good. But then we end up not always seeing the very best and the very amazing in what is the here and now, you know. And so yeah, it's just I think acknowledging the split, right? And that you bring up too in the split subject paper of yours, Javier, where there's like the ideal and the real, right? There's something the what that can help do is it might not make it any easier at all, you know, to go through such kind of depths of pain. But what it can do is remind oneself that you don't actually know. You know, and I think this is the other beautiful thing about nihilism. And actually, I often think about nihilism as related to negative theology. You know, we talk a lot about like affirmative theology and negative theology. And there's something so positive for thinking about the negative. Because when we realize how little we know, just take whatever you thought was, or even what you think you desire, and realize that you don't know. You don't even know what that is. You don't even know in a sense, you don't even know exactly what you're talking about because you're not in the present moment in that desire with that desire, you know? So it's kind of like, I think there's something almost encouraging in that way, or like, I don't know, how it can kind of be freeing. There's a type of liberation, I think, in accepting, sure, that's the hard part, but the accepting that, oh, right, whatever I think of God is not God, right? In the Eckhart sense, right? It's whatever I have this idea of God, of this person, of you know, like the best, whatever, fill in the blank, is not that, or whatever I'm so sure about. I don't know. I actually don't know. It's actually there's a not there. There's a not sure, not have, not real in a sense. And I think that can help to remind us that why we are so certain about things, and yet we have very little to substantiate the excruciation. Though it's not, I don't want to dismiss it because it's very, 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 very real. That's why you're saying illusions have real impacts. You know, illusions have very, very visceral, physical, tangible impacts. And that's not to be dismissed. I think, though, perhaps if we let it kill us, in a sense, we can allow for a rebirth into the present moment. Perhaps. Is that too idealistic? I don't know.
No, I think it's quite interesting because at the end of the day, whatever we discuss is perspective, right? And when you discuss this whole notion of liberation and you refer to sort of the physical pain of childbirth, mm-hmm. I think when you sort of discuss suffering and attachment, that moment of labor is physical pain, yes. Physical agony. Yeah. But what about the lifelong pain that you sort of carry as a mother in your anxiousness, in your anxiety, in the constant worry, the guilt of not doing enough or not being as present, or if this is enough, or have I done enough, you know? And I feel like in Buddhism, I sort of try and keep connecting the dots back to that, because for me, this whole notion of suffering, attachment, and desire just makes the most sense when connected to Buddhism. And what I'm trying to say is that suffering is a state of mind more than it is physical, because we don't really go through physical, actual pain. If I stub my toe somewhere, that pain is physical. It's there, it's limited, and I will treat it and it'll go away. But what about the state of your mind, the pain, and sort of you going in circles in your mind? That's why Buddha always said, you know, it's not about mastering life, it's about mastering your mind, and not the other way around. So for me, suffering is purely mental. It's a state of mind. And now there's a belief in the karmic energy in Buddhism. Like I said, you reap what you sow, you get what you give, you get what you put out into the universe. And there is obviously death, life, death, and rebirth. And in this karmic circle of life, you keep repeating it. You are born numerous times, for all that you know, and the same sort of suffering act continues. It just keeps happening. And to be enlightened, or to sort of attain this level of enlightenment, is to finally break the karmic cycle of being reborn, where you no longer go through any sort of conventional living, because you now know that you do not seek anything. You don't die with expectations. That's sort of unraveling yourself, unbecoming, to truly unbecome, just to just sit down and say, I genuinely accept everything for what it truly is in this very moment, and I seek nothing, is what enlightenment is. And that's what Buddha achieved, and that's why he's so glorified. And almost it seems impossible, because do we ever truly want to accept reality for what it is? Do we even, like you said, we're only accountable for ourselves, and we are always with ourselves, but are we truly present with ourselves? We're constantly influenced by external factors, and amidst life's busyness, you sort of forget to check in with yourself and to check where you are, where your state of mind is. You're constantly wondering about something that's happening miles away, or about a friend that lives in another part of the world, or something that you sort of have to do. Are you really in your head? Do you really sort of unbecome in your head? Here we are, deliberating notions and ideologies and theories by other thinkers. But do we sort of just take a moment and look within and truly acknowledge who we are? That's a work in progress, right? That's a work in progress. So to end the cycle of suffering, like what is it? Do we acknowledge? Do we see the cycle of suffering? Like, the way you used the metaphor was that it was almost new life. Just that with that pain you were reborn, because your level of like endurance was renewed, and you just feel like a new person. But after that moment, and sort of the lifelong repercussions of it, that constant state of mind that you're in as a mother, the good moments and the bad, that is sort of what creates a sense of suffering, because you're constantly anxious or worried or concerned, even in your happy moments. And I feel like in this particular instance, when you talk about attachment and whether it's relationships or worldly matters, it's that idea of how much it impacts your mind more than the physicality of it. It's how much are you in your head about it. That's sort of how I perceive the whole notion of desire and attachment, and how suffering becomes inevitable yet optional. Because if you just choose to sort of no longer acknowledge a certain matter, it stops affecting you. But till then, it's quite profound and consuming, isn't it? That's how it is. And so do we really sort of acknowledge our own mind? Are we ever truly in our head about ourselves? It's always about our desires, about our wants, about what could be, the possibility. It's the possibilities that keep us going, but never sort of the reality of today or this very moment. And I feel like that sort of creates a cyclical cycle of constant suffering and curiosity and anxiousness to a large extent. And what drives you? Are you driven by fear, guilt, resentment? Good or bad things. They don't necessarily have to be negative, and I don't mean to emphasize on the negative, but what are we driven from? What drives us? And we are attached to what drives us, right? Whether it's guilt or fear or ambition. We desire an outcome, and that sort of inevitably creates possibilities of those outcomes not happening or not working out. And I just think it's very cyclical when you sort of like keep going in circles about it. And that's ironic, because once you sort of acknowledge things for what they are, it's supposed to make sense and sort of be. But it isn't. It isn't that simple, at least for now. Yeah, so that's sort of what I was thinking. Yeah. What do you think, Javier? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I think there's like a real complexity to the thing. Like we can get, the crazy thing is like we always get caught up in the ideas. Like we're always imposing a standard of like an idea of myself, an idea of suffering, of what suffering is, an idea of what success is, an idea of what my desire is, an idea. There's always a gap between the idea and the thing in itself. And the real question is always, how do you acknowledge that gap? And how do you live within that gap? And I think like Buddhism is always like a very funny thing to me because it's really this notion of becoming what you already are. And I think that's why the notion of outcome, the notion of seeking is relatively problematic. Only because there is nothing to be sought, nothing to be outcomed. And the funny thing is, once you sort of acknowledge this, embody this, then you reach the thing that you've been trying to pursue. And of course, that is all nice and easy to say, but yeah. And that's why I always love Thomas Wynne's notion of just like, you know, there's nothing to be achieved. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like when that in that place, that was all very good. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Javier. In that place where we most feel desperate to do something is when we should be doing nothing. Yeah. And that's probably why practices like prayer and meditation can be so helpful, because it like gets you into a posture of not doing anything, you know, in a sense. It's almost like, you know, also, yeah, just the idea of maybe too in this really great phrase that Thomas Wynne has of achieving nothing, right? Is that phrase, there's nothing to achieve? It's almost like that is, if we could really, I want to say that there is something, and I don't mean to keep using the term lightly, but I do think there can be something quite freeing about that, though, because then we realize a lot of the like emotions and stuff come from a sense of actually achieving something, you know, like you're saying, like that's where a lot of the pain and disillusionment and anguish can come from, is the idea of achieving, you know, achieving something and feeling achieved, like feeling like achieved as well, like somebody or something is being able to achieve some of our, you know, our, you know, being achieved in that sense too, that, you know, being enjoyed or being appreciated, acknowledged, etc. And I want to touch on your wording, Sandy, where there's this idea that like, well, if you just don't acknowledge it, then it won't bother you or something like that. Yeah. I think there's something there though that it's ironic there again, because you can't just always like ignore, you know, like just don't think about it. Thanks. Like it's like that's so I think there's an idea, there's something about you must look it in the eyes, you know, you must face it. And I think in that acknowledging it, you can suddenly see that, like, it's almost like you suddenly just see you're actually just like looking at yourself. You're looking at your projections, you're looking at your, you know, like your own, the your own design of what is the outcome and what it should be, So it is funny. We definitely have shifted, I think, in a cultural mindset to outcome versus become, right? And that's interesting because then outcome, it's a lot about externalities, right? It's about, getting the girl or getting the job or getting the thing, or getting the boy. It's about the externalities. And what we forget is that it's actually in. It's actually in. The true income, if we want to do more wordplay, like the true wealth is actually in. It's inside. And it's the becoming. It's the being, right? Like you say, it's like we are being let be. Let be. It has to kind of, there's a sort of sense of like, just let it, because it's almost like I think of just water, right? Like river, this is time. It's always passing. So you can't, you can kind of scoop up to drink water and swallow it in that sense, but you don't. It is always kind of just, try to hold water for like 3 days. It's like you're not going to be able to do that, and it's always rushing over your hand or whatever you immerse in that river of time, in a sense. And so I just think this is really interesting to think about outcome versus become, and then also the income, right? The real sense of value is always what we make it, right? What we were saying a lot is it's a lot in our minds, and there's a lot of, we make the valuations, right? And what Nietzsche and with Cadell and Thomas Wynn are talking about is just this understanding of like, yes, you are the one creating the values, so you can also recreate the value. You can recreate as well. You can recreate. You can shift. You can sort of work with that flowing river, and instead of like freeze it, because then when it's frozen, it's much harder to drink from it. Like rivers have we don't understand the significance of rivers now because of our modern age of faucets and stuff, but rivers would have been a very big source for energy, for being able to bathe, being able to drink, all of these things. So the idea of it being frozen would have been a big problem for your livestock, for you, how are you gonna, so we can't, but we want it because then we feel like we could walk on it. Like there's something there, right? It's like, it's more substantiated, but then it's also frozen. It's fixed. And we have to allow it to be, I think that we have to allow that sense of just the flow of that river, truly, and of time and of circumstances, of values even. And that can get tricky because there has to be the conversation, the dialect with affirmatives, and you have to sort of eventually make some sort of value claim. You're going to, right? You're going to live a certain value claim whether you realize it or not. But I think that realization of like being able to negate that, being able to allow that negation, being able to be humbled and realize how little one knows, even about their own desires or what that would even mean in reality is I think that could be helpful. And remember that again, the outcome is never certain. But you can, and one's life is not even certain. Like what you think is going to fluctuate so much even within a day. But there is a sense of being able to build, you can only sort of build within yourself that sort of confidence, and perhaps like just in that place, even in that, it's a constant negation. This is like, and this is my last thing I'll say, I promise. But the idea of like when you work on muscles or like when you lift weights and stuff, you tear down, you break it, you break that so that it will become stronger. Negation on negation is to concretize assimilation, right? There is something that's supposed to kind of come from that. It's not just to be like eroded into nothing. It is in a sense a type of undoing to it's kind of like undoing to reveal or something like that. And so, but you have to allow the constant tear down to build up, and that's ultimately what then creates the confidence, I think, and the strength. If we just think about the analogy of muscles,
it's almost like you sort of have to break down to break open.
That's true. Yeah. And to go to the Deleuzian terms, one is a breakdown, a breakthrough, and I think too, like often it is in the breakdown where you're just like, this is the end, like this is horrible, like this is so bad, this is so painful, and yet
that might be the beginning, the defining turning point,
the breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's sort of it changes your perspective, and I feel like we often learn from very crucial and very difficult times more than we do with good times. I mean, to truly learn, to sort of assimilate and absorb what we need to in life, we have to go through some sort of tragedy or some sort of trauma, or at least we affiliate our becoming through that. So this whole point of becoming and unbecoming and the sense of delusion, it's quite tricky, because when you look at how much the world has evolved, man has created what the world is today. So it's a manifestation of minds. And that means we physically live in an illusion. If someone's mind.
My charger, I'll be right back.
Yes. We live in an illusion. And that's sort of, it's almost ironic, because here we are trying to unbecome and sort of unravel existing illusions. But, you know, what is evolvement? What is progress? Progress is physical manifestation of science, technology, what people think. And when you sort of think about becoming and unbecoming, I think it's a very thin line, because in the end of the day, every single day we're influenced by external factors, whether it's the friends we keep, the books we read, you know, the vicinity that we live in. We're constantly influenced by these things. So how do we sort of truly unbecome in that sense? Because can we ever really let go? I mean, we're physically somewhere, right? So how do we truly unbecome is another question that I sort of have in mind. In relation to presentness and nothing, you know, if you want to achieve nothing, well, nothing is everything, nothing is something. And then we want to be present. And when you're present somewhere. And as much as you're present in the moment, perhaps physically and mentally at some point, you're still not truly unbecoming, because the moment you unbecome, you become something you weren't before. It's almost like a paradox. What do you think, Javier? I sort of keep ending the question with what do you think, but yes, do tell.
Do you guys? I want to try this out for a moment. Do you guys mind like muting your the video, like you guys side?
Mute it? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking about this notion of unbecoming, and to sort of go back to what Daniel's been saying, which I think has been like really useful. It's like Daniel talked about, like, there really can't be any negativity. There always has to be like this. In order for there to be negativity, there has to be repetition. And that's what I really like about what Daniel wrote this morning, or what he submitted this morning, is that negativity involves repetition. You guys can hear me, right? Even though you guys have the video muted. Oh, that's weird. I can't hear you. And it doesn't say that you're muted. That's weird. Well, can you guys hear me? That's the one thing I want to say. No, you guys can't hear me, can you? Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I don't know, is it? Huh. No, you can't hear me? You guys can hear me? No? Okay. All right, let me see. That's an N. That's a no. That's weird. You guys are not. Yeah, you guys are not muted, and I still can't hear you. Weird. No. Not hear them. Maybe I'll do this. Let's see. No. That doesn't work. Okay. Okay. All right. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to figure out if I can still hear myself. Because I'm really curious if I can. I'm going to figure out if I can still hear myself. All right. I can definitely hear myself. Well, I think this probably has been like the most. This has been the video with like the biggest technological issues. Oh man, we did not expect this today. But let's see. I'll probably, if they come back, we'll probably go like another 15 minutes, and then I think I will just cut our losses today. If people can get what they got out of today, I think it was probably useful. Other than that, it's been rough, man. It's been rough trying to make this video like clear, and not have its problems. But we'll see. We'll see if they find something. But yeah, other than that, I don't know. Wondering if I don't want this video to go to waste though. That's the one thing I've been thinking. The one thing I don't necessarily want to happen. But it is might not be bearable for everybody, and so that's what I'm still trying to figure out. Of course, if I simply recorded this before going live, then maybe it would have been like, oh, let's just edit, and it would have been a long time would have been messing around. I don't know. Who knows? I think this is the first time that for me it was really bad. But yeah, let's see. Message Michelle here. I know they're trying to come back. Let's see. Okay. I always like looking at my YouTube video because it's like always like what, a couple seconds behind. So it's always weird. All right. They're back. All right, guys, I'm gonna let you get settled with the camera.
Sorry, it just like disconnected for a long time.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
We're back.
I still want to try. Did you guys hear me when you could mute yourself?
We could not. We could hear you at first, Javier, but then maybe 2 minutes in, it suddenly we couldn't hear you, and you were talking and probably saying really wonderful things, but we could not hear you.
Okay. Dang.
I'm sorry.
'Cause I thought that was gonna be the solution to that.
I know. Are we choppy now? Like when we talk, are we okay?
Yeah, you guys are fine. It's just apparently me talking through your guys' phone is choppy.
Yeah, we
So
would chop on Sandy's, but she doesn't like. Yeah,
I don't have cellular data
yeah.
yet.
I could try to get onto a laptop,
oh, you're good.
but I don't have the password. For
I think
this laptop.
I think we're just gonna have to cut our losses today.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What's that?
He said we may just have to cut our losses for today.
Yes, I'm sort of trying to restart and see that.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll be able
But
to.
yeah, if you guys have any like last thoughts and stuff.
We leave it at Unbecoming.
We leave it at what is unbecoming?
Unbecoming.
Some becoming, not unbecoming. Well, thank you. I still really enjoyed the conversation.
Yes.
I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties.
Oh, you're
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna not keep talking.
Oh,
Bless
so
your heart.
scratchy.
We can hear your laugh and you sound wonderful when you laugh. That's quite clear. It's funny how the laugh is sort of clear.
Yeah.
If you were just like a laugh track outside, man, like
we'd be waiting.
We want to hear the things you have to say.
Yeah,
so,
we were onto something.
Yeah. We were like really excited to hear your answer to Sandy's question.
Yeah.
To
I
be
think Daniel's
continued.
article was an answer to that question.
To be continued, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
We leave it at that.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you so much for doing this on your day off.
Yes, sometimes.